Good day and good evening. Welcome to Personal Branding, What You Need to Thrive Online, sponsored by Lifetime Learning in UVA's Office of Engagement. My name is Marilyn Musser, and I am your Lifetime Learning host for today's event. Please use the webinar Q&A feature located at the bottom of your screen to post questions that our speaker may answer toward the end of the program. During this presentation, closed captioning is available, and we will post resources in the webinar chat. This program is being recorded and will be posted in Lifetime Learning's podcast library. I am now pleased to introduce our speaker, Kimberley R. Barker, librarian for digital life and lecturer at the University of Virginia's Claude Moore Health Sciences Library. Kimberley's instructional work for UVA Health includes the contemporary topics of reputation management, online identity, digital privacy, effective use of social media for professional purposes, and personal branding. She is the designer and instructor of Introduction to Personal Branding, an online course popular with adults at all stages of life that you can find on the UVA Coursera platform. Kimberley is also a personal branding consultant, and we will post the link to her website in the chat. And now I welcome Kimberley Barker.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Lifetime Learning, for the opportunity to be here today. I'm very happy to be here. We will go through the presentation and we'll have time for Q&A. And I look forward to seeing what we see today. Let me get this started. Share the screen. All right. Before we begin, I would just like to take a moment to acknowledge that the land where we work at the University of Virginia is the unceded traditional and current territory of the Monacan people. In this session, we will define personal branding, establish best practices. You'll learn how to effectively communicate your brand. We're going to talk about your digital assets. We're going to talk about managing your reputation, which is very important. We'll touch on digital privacy and security, and we will wrap it up with the very cheerful topic of death and your brand. The basic flow of the presentation is that we will have a definition, an explanation, a discussion, and an action item. And before we get started, I'd just like to go ahead and do a quick poll question. If you would just take a minute or so to think about what best describes the state of your brand. You're here, so I assume that you maybe have some questions, maybe you're not totally happy with it, or maybe you are, and you just want to see what's going on. Okay, great. It looks like the majority of you feel like your brand needs improvement, and that's not at all uncommon at all. So let's see what we can do about that. So personal branding is one element of your digital identity. Now, whether you know it or not, you have a digital identity. Even if you have never posted on social media, you have never blogged, you have never done anything online, you have a digital identity, and Google is shaping it for you. There are tax records about you, anything that is in a county database that can be searched. All of these things are part of your digital identity. And I think it's important that you take control of it and shape it. So there's reputation, there's your social media presence, and there's your brand. So I like the definition that I came up with for personal branding, which is that first bullet point. To me, the most important part of a brand is matching your public image to your inner values. That saves you a lot of time. We'll get into ethics later, but being very clear about who you are and what your values are saves you a lot of time in the long run. In my opinion, and can help you not having to deal with certain situations you would rather deal with. So to me, that is the heart of branding. So I want you to think about the following images. As you see these, I want you to think about how they make you feel, what they make you think of, and what kind of person you think would have this cup if they had a choice. If somebody could pick this cup, how do you think you might describe them? So to me, this is kind of vintagey. It's a little bit funky and offbeat. This one is a little more industrial. It's very plain, but it's also a classic. It looks very sturdy. It looks kind of handmade. And then there's this one. Everyone's entitled to my opinion. Now, if the person who picks it picks that as a joke, you're probably okay. But someone who would pick this unironically, oh boy. There are lots of words that you could describe that person for sure. Your action item for this is to think about and read The Brand is Personal again. I think it will resonate and it will make you consider all of these things. Just like those pictures that I just showed you of the coffee cups will help you think about what you want people to think of when they see your photo. If you decide to develop a logo or something, wonderful. It's not really necessary, but when people see your name, what do you want them to think about? So step number one is the number one step for a lot of things. In creating your brand, you need to think about it. It seems really simple until you start to do it. So some people say, isn't self-promotion wrong? And promoting myself makes me feel uncomfortable. And we have a poll question for this. So does promoting yourself or your work make you uncomfortable? Yeah, a lot of people say yes, some people say no, and a lot of people, the majority of you, say sometimes. And that's totally understandable, of course. But the way I think about it is I have two metaphors that you might like. Number one is the party. When you decide to have a party, you do a number of things. You pick a date, you plan what you're going to serve, food and beverage wise. Back in my day, we would have made a mixtape, but now you do a Spotify playlist. You make sure your house is clean, things are ready to go. Now, the day of the party comes, the time of the party comes, and nobody's shown up. And you're like, where is everybody? But then you remember, I forgot to send invitations. I forgot to tell people I was having a party. Has anybody ever gotten mad because they were invited to a party? Very rarely, in weird circumstances, I would bet, if that has ever happened. People want to be invited to your party. You don't have to force it on them, but you can certainly extend the invitation. Nobody's going to be angry about that. The other metaphor I like is that of the job interview. When we find out that we're getting an interview, a lot of us do research about the company or institution. We try to find out what we can find out about the person who would be our manager or supervisor. And then the day of the interview, we get up, we attend to our hygiene, we put on clothes that are appropriate to the situation, and we go in prepared and ready. To me, it would be strange if you didn't do that. The same way it would be strange to me if you didn't take control of your brand. Because for many of us, particularly in this connected world that we live in, and really, we are all of us worldwide through the internet, your online identity is people's first impression of you. No more do we have the luxury of being seen for the first time in person. It really does come down to your online identity being the first exposure that people have to you. So keep in mind the party and the job interview. So you have a number of opportunities for brand expression, both internally within your organization and externally. And some that you might not have thought of is Slack or Discord. You know, we spend a lot of time on those. There are things that you can do to make them your own and further your brand in that way. Your email signature file, the fonts that you use. Now, some people always, what are you talking about fonts? That's so ridiculous. It's really not. For instance, would you ever picture the font that you would use for a haunted house? Okay, kind of the creepy, spidery, flowy one. Would you ever use that on a wedding invitation? Unless you're throwing a themed wedding, probably not, because fonts have a mood. They express certain things, even if people aren't conscious of it. So I'm very particular about fonts. I will not get into it, but I have strong feelings. Your brand can be furthered through your performance evaluations. Yours in particular, your self-evals, phone and video meetings. Again, I talk about fonts because I can't let it go. And then of course, on your social media platforms, that's kind of obvious, right? But also search engine results, definitely your photos. And of course, conference and video calls. I would not go as far to say that my wallpaper here was a deliberate brand choice, but what I will say is that it is very me. This is very indicative of who I am, colors that I like. I love nature. It's very indicative of me. And so in that way, in that I try to make my inner values, my outward brand, it's very on brand. You might have noticed that there are some common factors across your brand expression. These are but a few. These are things that can carry through no matter if it's internal, external, social media. These are all common things. So you want to make sure that they match, make sure that they all are consistent. Consistency is really key in your brand and brand expression. So in my mind, what your brand should do effectively is communicate who you are, what your skills are, what you can offer, and your ethics. Now, a lot of times when I'm dealing with younger folks who maybe they've just matched and they're going to residency, they really want to get jobs. And so I understand you have to pay the bills. And sometimes it is necessary for us to keep certain things quiet that we would prefer not to. I will never tell you not to be able to pay your bills, but I would ask you just to consider what you need to conceal and maybe what you aren't comfortable concealing, because ultimately you have to live with yourself. You have to be authentic. I have a whole list of action items here, and don't worry, this presentation will be available to you as a PDF to download. So if you don't remember everything, don't try to take frantic notes. It'll be okay. Really, what I think is important about establishing your brand is to be very, very honest with yourself. In my course, that is the single most important thing that I ask people do. You need to sit down and you need to be honest with yourself about what you want, what your gifts are, what your weaknesses are. And you need to think about what you really and truly want so that you can make an honest, realistic plan and work towards that. So, another little exercise. Consider these logos and how they make you feel. We all probably feel a little bit differently than we did a year ago about this logo. As soon as I see that one, I just go, oh, not a fan of Comcast. NFL, don't know much about her. NASA almost always makes me cry because I think NASA is amazing. And of course, my beloved Starbucks. Now, all of these institutions have put a lot of time, talent, treasure into evoking a response from you. All of these logos were carefully considered to convey something about themselves to you, the consumer. I don't know who doesn't love panda bears, but that was a very smart decision on the WWF's part. Keep it simple, keep it adorable. NASA, there's just something about it that's a little retro that is exciting. On and on and on. You have your own feelings about this. And again, I would ask you to consider, what is people's feeling when they see your name or your photo or if you have a logo? What do they think and feel? Because the story And the relationship that people are having with you is the huge part of your brand. So if you're taking the course, this may sound familiar. Choose your 3 cornerstone words that sum up your brand. Use those 3 words to write a 3-sentence mission statement, and then create your board of directors. You can keep that as a thought experiment if you want, or you can literally ask people to be on your board of directors. And then you can meet them for lunch, buy them lunch once a year, and talk about your goal setting and what you've accomplished this year. A lot of people have found that really, really helpful. Some more action items. If you are feeling full of beans, go ahead and create a style guide. Choose colors, fonts, and moods that match your brand. The Jefferson TomTom, I couldn't think of the word. TomTom Festival doesn't have a logo, but they have a certain shade of purple that they use. And when you see it, you know what it's for. Go on and create a whole media kit. Be ready with, press releases, your own, like I said, the style guide, the photos. I hate being photographed, hate it with a passion. It's much better now though, since we can use our phones and I can take selfies, because if I really hate something, I can take it 1,000 times and I won't be annoying anyone else. I can do what it takes to make it look the way I want it to. Update them every 2 years, unless if I were to shave my head, I would need to update my photos immediately, because you never want to throw off a first in-person meeting. If I have long hair in my photos online and then I go to meet with a client and my head is shaved, that puts the whole, it's just confusing. Is that the right person? So think about that. It doesn't have to be professional. Think about how you want to present yourself. If you're a doctor, do you want to be wearing your white coat? Or would you prefer something more casual with your dog? Think about what you want to convey. Go ahead and create business cards. It's really not that expensive to create your business cards. And then you have something, a tangible thing to give people. All right, let's talk about your brand strategy. You need to determine who your target audience is and where they're looking for help. Is it online? Is it in print? We have a quick poll question. I like the confidence. One person was immediately like, yes, I know exactly who it is. I like that. Okay, so it looks like we are fairly evenly torn between yes and maybe, with a few no's. Okay, that's great. That's a great place to be wherever you are. There's always room to do more. Let me give you some tips and tricks for this. Okay, you want to identify your target audience, and like I said, find out where they are. This may not be digital. If you're working with elder folks, a lot of them love Facebook, but some of them still love to read a newspaper. So don't dismiss print ads either. Identify people out in the world, maybe on Twitter, maybe somewhere else, who do something similar to what you want to do. Like if you're working to change fields, learn from them. Don't be annoying, don't bother them, but you can network from them. You can observe what they do, and then you can nicely ask them to mentor you. Be careful in your ask, don't ask too much. But people are often flattered to be asked. And I found that most people are willing to help you if you ask. Plan your 1, 3, and 5-year goals, and then put your marketing around that, but don't be afraid to adjust. When I say be intentional in all of your interactions, what I mean is just give thought, be thoughtful to what you're doing. And that's not always easy, I know. One thing that I always like to emphasize to people is that a win for someone else is not necessarily a loss for you. So always be generous in sharing. If something in your field, a colleague or an acquaintance had something published or has gotten a big account, don't be afraid to congratulate them publicly. It never hurts to be gracious. And of course, give credit if you do something or led to something that somebody else created. One thing that you can do is become a curator for excellent content. One of the things I'm most proud of from this past year is that I handle social media for the library, and our Facebook page has become curated content for COVID-19. A lot of people were doing doom scrolling, and then they said, I found the library's Facebook page and it's curated. It gives me a depth of knowledge about what's going on, but it's not so overwhelming. So I was very proud of that. That's one thing that you can do if you're an expert on something. You can lead other people to quality content. And don't forget to use your platforms as an interconnected ecosystem. If you have some long form home, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, but if you have a website or a blog where you're writing something, always make sure that you go onto Twitter or Facebook, whatever your choice, and link back to that long form content. I often say that Twitter is a fish hook, and you need to bait your hook with that long form content. So send it out there, apply the proper hashtags to it, tag appropriate accounts, and then pull people back. And you can look at all of your Google Analytics. I'm not sure if you know that or not, but you can look at all your stuff. You can look at your Twitter analytics. You can look at Facebook. Make sure that if you're putting in the work consistently across platforms, which I hope you're doing, make it work for you as much as possible. Don't make them siloed. Put them together as an ecosystem. I think you'll find that that really pays off. Another thing you can do is become known as an approachable authority. So original content, if you have the time and the inclination to make it, can be very powerful. And people are always looking for new takes on things. So if you have something that's truly original that you have to contribute it, great. You can also be a curator, as I mentioned earlier. So you can go and grab the best of the best and create content around that, like a weekly wrap up of the best news in your field. Make it so that people who are familiar with your field, instead of running an old-timey RSS feed or doing a Google search, know that if they go to your Twitter feed, they can in just a few minutes get caught up with all they need to know. I've already mentioned a website or social media platform. That's a great place to host your long form content. Say yes to as many things as possible. It can be difficult to say yes because we're scared or we're nervous or lots of reasons, right? Maybe we're tired. I have found through 5 years of doing this sort of work that if I had said no to the original MOOC, or I had said no to various opportunities, there aren't very many people at UVA who do this sort of work. And I think I'm the only one in the health system. So by saying yes, I know that I've gotten to help a lot of people, and that's very valuable. And you never know what saying yes to will get you or where it will lead you. So if you can say yes, say yes. Interact with your followers. Make sure that you're paying attention to the social part of social media, and expect to be paid for your time and expertise. I am not being paid for this, but you are worth it, and you deserve that recognition. I highly recommend the Pew Research Centers. I recommend them just entirely as an organization, but particularly their Internet and American Life project is so valuable. I've given you the link specifically to social media use in 2021. It will tell you where different demographics are. So if you know who you're trying to reach, you can see where they're most likely to be online. Then you need to create a strategy for reaching that demographic, and then decide what kind of digital real estate you need. And I say no more than 3. You have limited energy, I think 2 is even better. But if you simply must, then I say no more than 3. All right, let's talk about establishing your strategy. You want to craft your message, not just for your demographic that you're trying to reach, but also for each platform. This is another reason why I say no more than 3. You've got YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. You've got all kinds of opportunities out there. And what you need to remember is all zebras are animals, but not all animals are zebras, right? So all of these are social media, but every social media is not Twitter, is not Instagram. They all require different crafting. That's why I am not a fan of things like Hootsuite, where you can set up one message to be distributed by different platforms. It is easier, but it's super obvious that you've done that. And I think it's more important to really focus on the social and social media. So I get asked this question a lot. Kimberly, what is the best social media platform? Well, it's a three-part answer. Number one is the one that your target audience uses. Number two is the one that you'll use. Number three is LinkedIn, right? You obviously want to be where your folks are. You want to put the most work into reaching the most amount of people. But if you hate it, like if everybody's on Instagram, but you hate Instagram and you don't want to use it, it's not going to be very effective for you. A lot of people who don't like social media ask me, what should I do? Because they're, they realize they need digital real estate because they are, again, trying to shape and control that online identity and that brand. And I say LinkedIn because it was created for business. It gives you a lot of opportunities for a photo, to link to publications, to talk about your volunteer work. It gives you the opportunity to create long form work so you can publish there. And of course, you've got a network. It also gives you access to groups, and there are all kinds of groups on there. So that's another way to build like those mini networks. So if all else fails, try LinkedIn. This is just to show you the kind of opportunities that you have. Again, I love nature. And so my cover photo is usually something to do with being outside. You have an opportunity for your photo. And this is what you see. I'm sorry, let me go back. This is what you see if you aren't logged into LinkedIn, right? But you see my bio down at the bottom, and I link to my personal branding course. So it gives you lots of opportunity to very quickly establish your brand. And then this is my Twitter page, and this is what I call the page of opportunities, because again, you've got a cover photo, you have your profile photo, and one trick that I like to tell people is use hashtags in your bio, because you will then show up in hashtag search results. I like that a lot. It also gives you the opportunity to include a website. So I have my website there, and it gives you the opportunity to pin a tweet, which you can see right there. So again, this is an opportunity to tell a story about yourself and to quickly communicate a lot about yourself. All right, let's make it easy for people to find you. Okay, that's really important. And this is talking about search engine optimization. Many of you may have heard of it. Some of you may not have heard of it. And so I have this action item for you, which is to read SEO for Dummies cheat sheet. It will explain to you what to do. It'll explain search engine optimization to you. You can do it yourself. Some people think you need a professional to do it. You don't. You can do it yourself. So I'll leave that for you to figure out later. All right, let's talk about maintaining your brand. One thing that I like to emphasize to people is that anything that anybody can find out about you online or anywhere else is part of your brand, whether you want it to be or not. I do consults within my work at the Health Sciences Library for clinicians and other folks who work in the health system. And so a couple of times people have gotten angry. They've asked me to do an audit of their online presence to see, kind of give them my opinion about what they should do or if they're in good shape. And so typically the way I approach that is that I do my searching and I cut and paste things into a Word document that I print out and take to our meeting. Now we meet over Zoom, so it's not quite the same effect. A couple of times people have gotten angry because they felt that what I did was invasive, and I found things that they weren't particularly thrilled about. Now, I don't do this to make people uncomfortable, okay? Because when the client is uncomfortable, I too am uncomfortable. I do this because a lot of times people simply don't know what is out there about them. They don't realize that it brings up their divorced partner's name. It brings up where their child goes to school. It brings up how much their house cost. It brings up a lot of things. And while I am not eager to introduce awkwardness into the situation, I think it's important that people know. There's not a lot you can do about county records, but I think it's important for people to know what's out there and then take steps if they choose to try and control that. There are some things you can do. It's kind of an ongoing battle. But I think until you know, you can't really take control of it. So just keep that in mind. So if there's something out there or you think there's something out there, you need to know. You need to find out and you need to figure out an approach for it. So this includes things like protected and unprotected social media. And please remember that screenshotting is a thing. So even if you have all of your accounts private, which I don't know why all of your accounts would be private if you're trying to use them to build your brand, they can still be screenshotted and shared. So nothing is ever truly private online and nothing ever goes away online. There is something called the Wayback Machine where you can put in a URL and it will take you back to a certain time. You can figure out what things look like over the years. Librarians, I believe, are behind it, which does not surprise me at all. Photos. I will tell you that there is a photo out there of me from maybe 15 years ago where I'm dressed as a fairy and I'm drinking a beer. Now, I am not ashamed of this photo. I'm not ashamed of the fact that I had on a fairy costume and I was drinking beer. But that is not the first thing that I like people to see about me, right? Again, I'm not ashamed of it. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But as a professional person of a certain age, there are other photos that I would like for people to see first. Reviews and endorsements. This means of you, and this means things that you've written about other people. So if you have endorsed a candidate or written a Yelp review, all of this kind of stuff can be found. So keep that in mind. Monitor your presence and your reputation by creating search alerts. If you have not done this yet, please do. Go to google.com and sign in. You'll need a Google account to do this, and go to google.com/alerts. And you can put in any kind of thing that you want. I do variations of my name. My first name is frequently misspelled. I also do Kim. And so that way you can be alerted if something is published about you. It's just good to stay on top of things. You need to post at least 2 to 3 times a week. You need to be consistent. Again, consistency is key. You want to post 2 to 3 times a week of stuff that is interesting to the people who follow you. And speaking of that, here's the 80-20 rule. 80% of what you post should be content that is of interest to your followers. 20% can be about you. What I frequently tell clinicians and other healthcare workers is people follow you for a reason. They find what you're doing interesting. They find what you have to say interesting. That's all great, right? That's great. But 80% of the time, it should be just like general content about your field. 20% can be, hey, I published in Nature and here's the link and I'm so grateful and excited or whatever. People want to know that. They just don't want to know it 80% of the time. So keep those things in balance. So quickly, we have to talk about Google. Google dominates the world, not just in the Western part of the world, but the world search engine market. It comes in at like 98% or something. So when I talk about searching, I'm talking about Google because it's important to understand how it works. One thing is Google Truth. And that is just that, well, it came up in the Google results, so it must be true, right? And this could be something as innocuous as, well, Google says that the restaurant opens at 11:30, right? Or it could be something worse like, oh, that person has a name collision with a known felon, but they kind of look the same, right? We rarely question what we find in the Google results. Keep that in mind. And then you need to understand how Google works. And this is the really, really short version. Basically, Google has it so that the more websites that point to a website, the higher in the search engine results they appear. So you see the big yellow smiley face has so many smaller smiley faces pointing at him. And that just means the more, if you're in your field and people are writing about you and pointing to your Twitter account or pointing to your website, that will appear higher in the search results. So it is important to have your brand and understand how Google works, because according to a poll published by CareerBuilder in 2018, more than half of employers have found content that caused them not to hire a candidate. You can see some other stats there. Everybody is Googling everybody is the gist of this, even to 48% of employers who are Googling current employees. So that's from an employer point of view. Now let's look at like consumers. 94% said that positive reviews make them more likely to use a business. Negative reviews make me less likely to use a business, said 92%. And then 79%, I trust online reviews as much as personal recommendations. That's huge. And that's why it's really important to take control of your online identity and to monitor it, to know what people are saying. So at this point, you may be thinking, I give up. This is horrifying. What am I going to do? Maybe I should just stay away from it. No, you shouldn't, because 50% of employers are 57%, excuse me, are less likely to even interview a job candidate if they're unable to find information online. If somebody Googles you and they find nothing, that is suspicious. That is very suspicious. It will appear that you have been scrubbed. So again, if you really hate it, LinkedIn, my friends. Let's talk very quickly about digital privacy and digital security. There are varying levels of these things. I'm very proud of this, by the way. I came up with this all on my own. How private is this box? It's not private at all, right? We can clearly see that they're all chocolate cupcakes, right? It's also not very secure. It'd be very easy for me to sneak up and grab one of those and be out. This one's a little bit better. We can't see what's in that row under the box top that's not clear. They may be chocolate, we don't know. And it's a little bit more secure, right? I would have a tougher time. Those tabs always defeat me, right? But then we have this one. It is completely private. We have no idea what's in there. Cake, cookies, we don't know. And it is very secure, multiple layers of security with the string. I bet you there's some tape on that box. And of course, the dreaded tabs. So you need to understand various levels of security and privacy and make sure that you guard yourself. And some ways to do this is just remember, free Wi-Fi isn't free. They're monitoring you. I do it too when I go to Starbucks, but it's my duty to tell you and remind you of that. They tend to opt us out. Opt us more into open settings. So be aware of that, and then maybe consider a password manager. Set up search alerts, search in incognito mode. Google is your helpful assistant, and it is always trying to give you the information that it wants. So when you Google yourself, do it in incognito mode and disable your cookies so that you can see what other people see about you rather than what it thinks you want to see, and then review your security settings. Finally, we're going to do this kind of quick. This is death in your brand. Many of us, it's been around long enough now, death and social media, that we have had friends die, and they're still kind of showing up, right? So you need to think about this in terms of your brand. Do you have any goals? Or are you just like, I'm done, I don't care? Either way is fine. There are companies, if you look at that last bullet point, the last sub-bullet point, there are companies that will do post-mortem brand networking for you. They will send out your messages for up to 50 years. It's a whole thing. But if you've had thoughts about that, there are ways that you can do it. And you need to think about your digital legacy, if you have one or not. I would say, though, make a plan. and choose a designate on as many platforms as you can. And please leave a list of your passwords with instructions. You just include this any other way you would do death related planning. It's very important to try and make our passing as easy as we can. And plus you get to decide what happens. So I think it's worth considering. So in summary, take stock, figure out your plan of action, set up your digital real estate. If you want to create a style guide and media kit, figure out what your niche, what your specialty is going to be, then protect your brand, digital security and privacy, and then maintain it. You have to feed and water it. I have a couple of links here with I have a couple of slides here with links and resources, but I wanted to know if you had questions.
All right. Thank you, Kimberly. Kimberly, that was very interesting. And I think probably most of us in the audience are saying, oh my gosh, we certainly have work to do on our brand. And I'll have you know that all the resources that you posted, we have been posting in the chat. So I encourage our audience to check those resources. And Kimberly, we have questions that came in before the talk and during the talk. Are you ready for some?
I'm ready.
Okay, great. So there is somebody who asked, they said that their employer doesn't allow them to speak on issues related to their work. So is there a way to have a recognizable and attractive public brand while they're not able to blog or advertise their opinions on social media?
So they're not allowed to talk about the work that they do, or they're not allowed to give opinions?
They're not allowed, right? They're not allowed to give their opinions and speak publicly about issues related to their work.
Oh, okay, okay. That requires a careful hand, as you know. That's kind of a non-answer. I'm sorry. It is possible. It can be difficult. You know, as somebody who has worked her entire career in academia, I get used to a certain amount of freedom, right? To say what I think and what I believe. But I realize that's not true for everybody else. It is possible, but it is tricky. I am not going to say specific things right now because it is very delicate and I would want time to think about it. If you're the person who asked me that question, feel free to email me and maybe we can talk that out. It's possible, but difficult.
Okay, thank you. A few people have said that they might have multiple audiences. Maybe they don't have one way they want to brand themselves. Is there an umbrella approach to how they might brand themselves? Or, you know, perhaps they have different jobs or a job in a very strong hobby or something like that.
You know, you can do an umbrella term, right? An umbrella brand. You can do that. What I might suggest is if you have a long form piece of real estate, such as a blog or your website, and just as an aside, I really recommend that everybody buy your own domain name with your name because they're very cheap and they're very cheap to buy and they're very cheap. You pay a yearly fee. It's very inexpensive. And you don't want somebody else getting your name. And if you have to buy it from a company who deals in these, it can cost you $1,000. So I say go ahead and buy it. And if you ever want it, you have it. Going back to the original question, I think it would be good to have your umbrella brand on your digital real estate, but choose one social media for one part of your brand and one social media for the other. You know, I just think it would be easier to build up a following using hashtags and targeted advertising. Say if you chose Instagram for your strong hobby and if you chose Facebook for your job. Sometimes I think it would make it easier for you and it would make it easier for your audience.
All right, so what if somebody is trying to adjust their brand and they want searches to end up on their current work and not on past jobs? How could they go about that?
Okay, so this is, it's not quite the same, but when new physicians come to UVA, so many of them, they have tried to get their old hospitals to take them off their website. And even if they do, search engines, because remember that the slides on Google, right, how it works. the more that something points to a web page, the higher up it is. One of the best things that you can do is to generate positive or neutral content about your new workplace or your new brand or your new whatever. And you can do this in a variety of ways. If you're working for a company and they have a newsletter, get featured in that newsletter, tweet it out. Just work on generating content because it's not going to happen on its own. Eventually, if somebody does take you off of an old website, things will stop pointing that way and they'll point to the new job. But it's an ongoing problem. And again, just generating that content and getting the crawlers and things to stop pointing to that.
Okay, and before I ask the next question, I want to remind the audience that the resources are in the chat and that that a PDF of this presentation, correct? Is that correct, Kimberly, will be available and you'll be able to check out all the links that Kimberly has there. A few people have asked that.
I would
All right,
never
so-
leave you hanging. I would never leave you hanging.
They'll be relieved. All right, so back to the questions. A student asks how a student might start their personal branding. What are some good things to do?
All right, so consistency is key. Raise your hand if you're sick of me saying that. I'm sorry, it's true. I've actually had a few college freshmen take my Intro to Personal Branding MOOC, and I think that is perfect because you may change your mind about your major, you may change your mind about your ultimate career, but as long as you are consistently putting things out, whether that's on Twitter, whether that's on a website, it doesn't really matter. If you have something that you're happy with, that when internship, employers or future employers, when they Google you, if they find 4 to 6 years worth of stuff about you that consistently demonstrates who you are, what your values are, what you're interested in, what you like to do, that is very powerful. It's very easy for you to do this. In some ways, it's easier for students to establish a brand than it is for mid-career folks who are changing, just because it's not tabula rasa exactly, but if you are going in with a direct purpose to start creating your brand and you do that consistently, it's great. You'd be very lucky to graduate with that much built around your brand over time.
Okay, thanks, Kimberly. What would you recommend for introverts to do to build a brand that's online in a work from home world?
Okay, so I am an introvert. Sometimes people have a hard time believing that. Good social skills were beaten into me as a child. But I am definitely an introvert. I've been working from home for the past year. It has been glorious. If you are an introvert who is good at being online, which many introverts are, most of the time our problem comes from being surrounded by people. Introvert, that doesn't mean that you don't like people. It just means that the way you process information and the way you carefully think things through, you don't do that well in a situation where you're surrounded by people because they sort of drain your energy. Whereas extroverts, they feed off the energy of others. So I don't think you have any problems at all, my fellow introvert, doing this. Again, just decide that 2 to 3 times a week, you are going to consistently post. You're going to think about what you're posting and you're going to build it. You do this every time you do anything, you're building your brand online, right? It's just the consistency in posting and the consistency of your tone, the consistency of your message, the consistency of everything that you're advertising. Again, I feel like that's a little bit of a not great answer. So if I don't answer it as well as you want, please email me. I'll work on it.
All right, thanks, Kimberly. Do you have any thoughts about having your picture on your personal business card?
Okay, so there's probably more. There are two main schools of thought about this. Number one, we know from research, remember I'm a health sciences librarian, so I love research-based stuff. We know that other humans, our eyes are more drawn to photos. They are even more drawn to photos of people. So that definitely catches your eye. On the other hand, some people just aren't comfortable with that. And I have seen that consistently, photos on business cards in realty. I've seen that a lot. I haven't seen it as much in other industry. That doesn't mean it's wrong. I don't necessarily think that having your photo on a business card will give people a bad impression of you. Like, oh, he must think he's really handsome. I don't think there's going to be that, right? I don't think there's necessarily anything bad about it, but I would just urge you to consider your own comfort and whether or not you want your photo out there. I mean, our photos are all out there, whether we want them to be or not. But for me, I think that would be the deciding factor, was whether I felt comfortable with it or not.
All right. Could you give them any tips for naming their brands? Or do you have names for the brands?
Oh boy. Okay. So my consulting business is Gaelic. It is an Irish word that is spelled nothing like it looks. And it basically means the full moon. I have a lot of reasons for having named it that. It was a terrible, terrible name. And I haven't done a lot under that name, mostly is when I'm submitting invoices. You know, I just couldn't name my company after myself. I think that if you are running a business, I don't think it's a bad idea to have a name. If you want to choose something that's kind of personal to you, don't choose something in Gaelic. Just, I'm telling you, don't do it. I think that's fine. It should be easy to remember, easy to spell, so that if people, oh, it was named Bizbrandio, right? You need to know how to be able to Google it and find you. I think the name of it will contribute to the, remember, that's another decision that contributes to your brand. So I think it's a great idea. Just don't use Gaelic like I did.
All right. Thank you. Now you mentioned a few things about posting and privacy, et cetera. So people may be concerned with having their photos posted and the ones that are posted protected. So how can they do that or see to it that they're not downloaded without permission? You had given a few resources.
Okay, so basically that is impossible. If there's a photo out there of you, there's a photo out there of you. There are some things you can do in code to make it impossible for somebody to right click and save image. That does exist. That is, I don't know the command, but I know it exists. However, you can't stop people from screenshotting things. Like that's what I do. Not of people, I'm not creepy, not that creepy. But if I need something and I'm not able to save it as an image, I just, save it as a screenshot, right? And then I edit it and I use the image that I need. I would not worry so much about trying to get your photo off the internet because it's pretty much impossible. There is a terrible saying in digital marketing, and it is, where's the best place to hide the body? On the third page of Google results, right? Because nobody looks there. Think about your own habits. Unless you are more savvy or unless you're really, really looking for something, you don't go past the second page of Google results. So again, here comes that strategy of positive and negative, positive and neutral content that you're generating to force it down, right? So get an Instagram and I don't know, take pictures of trees, right? That's something you can do that are associated with you. So give up, you'll never get it off the internet. Just find a way to push it down.
Okay, good advice. Can you name any pros and cons of using your own name as a URL versus a business name? Or maybe a business name that is not your name?
Sure. So Again, I'm just going to plug buying your name as a domain name so that, I mean, I'm sorry, but so nobody else can have it, right? Because you don't know what they'll do with it. And your name is part of your brand, even if it isn't the name of your company. I can only think that, you know, say a few years down the road, you want to get out of your current business and you never named it. It was just your name, like Barker's Consulting or whatever. And you wanted to get away from that. You would not be able to distance yourself as well. But I don't think there's anything wrong with having your name. Again, I don't think that, same thing with the picture on the business card, right? I don't think necessarily that people are going to think twice about the fact that your business is your name. I don't know if that's your concern or not, but I don't think that it conveys anything bad about you at all. But I will say, choosing a particular name does give you another opportunity to further that brand. So if you've got a really clever name for a business, go for it.
Right. Thank you, Kimberly. You mentioned hashtags before and how you connect them. Can you speak a little bit more about that and how to best use hashtags?
Sure. So one of the best things that you can do is go to Twitter. Well, I say Twitter because that's where they kind of originated, but you also use them on TikTok, you use them on Instagram. They're pretty much it. People even use them on Facebook. Go to a platform that uses hashtags, right? And search for what you're searching for. So if your business is making scarves, right? Go in and do a search for scarves, all the different variations that you can think. And as you're pulling up posts, make note of the hashtags that are used on the different posts and write those down. And then once you find one good hashtag, click on that hashtag and start seeing what comes up. One thing I would say too is before you start using a particular hashtag, do a search for it and see what content is associated with it. Because what I found out a couple of times is things that I thought were acronyms or I thought meant something else were not being used the way that I was going to use it. It led to other things that I didn't want to be involved with. So do your searches on social media platforms and make note of the hashtags, then follow those hashtags and just make your list from the ones that are really popular. That's the in a nutshell, that's the quickest way I would say to do it.
Okay, and the last question, which is a follow-up to that question, is there a difference between keywords and hashtags?
Yes, so hashtags are the things that have the pound sign in front of them. And keywords are something that isn't necessarily hashtag, but is also being mined. Okay. So all of these different platforms, they're mining everything from all the posts. So if I do a search for, I don't know, water bottle, right? I'm going to get posts that have the words water bottle in it, or water bottle as a tag in the photo, or water bottle as a hashtag. So if you don't search for a hashtag, you may still get what you want. They're kind of used the same, but they're not exactly the same. You could do a search for either, and I think they'll lead you the same place though.
Okay, thank you, Kimberly. We had a lot of audience questions, and I think people really appreciate this. There's a lot to think about with defining our brand, so I think we all better think about tonight how to better communicate our values and our professional gifts, and we thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you, everybody.
And to our audience, upcoming in Lifetime Learning is the virtual event, The Politics of Food in 2 Indigenous Communities on May 11th at 2:00 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. I hope you would join us for that. We also invite you to join us for any or all 5 of our virtual talks during our June extended program, Jefferson's West, Lewis, Clark, and Native Americans. Check out more UVA faculty expertise in Lifetime Learning's podcast library, UVA Speaks podcast series, and Thoughts from the Lawn blog. You can find all Lifetime Learning events and online resources at alumni.virginia.edu/learn. And until next time, stay engaged and wahoo wah.